Hi, it's Lisa with Lisa Grace Wiggs, and today I was just going to basically tell my type 1 diabetes story. So I was diagnosed a little over 17 years ago now. Grace was a baby. I'm still breastfeeding. What's interesting is, I had just had Grace not even a year prior to that, and my pregnancy was normal. No, my glucose tolerance tests were normal. There were absolutely no issues. I mean, I can say that gestational diabetes is a type 2 diabetes related, thing. It doesn't have anything to do with type 1 because type 1 is autoimmune. Your immune system basically attacks itself. So, in other words, you absolutely can have normal blood sugar, months or even a year earlier or years earlier. Everything's going to be normal in your body until your immune system basically says, okay, that's it. I am attacking the beta cells in the pancreas and, I'm done. And then it's just a matter of time, days, weeks. I don't think it's very long after that point where really you're going to start exhibiting signs and symptoms, and you're going to be diagnosed pretty quickly with type 1. Type 2 is very different. Anyhow, so I already knew, that we had type 1 diabetes in our family, but, never thought I would get it. Kind of interesting. But so one day I had to take our kids to the doctor. So Riley had croup really bad when he was a baby, and we actually ended up having the paramedics out in the middle of the night before. He was very sick at the time, and I think he was probably 2.5 or 3 at that point. But anyway, they came out and had to give him a breathing treatment. We had everything at home, but just nothing was working at that point. So the next morning, we were going to the pediatrician for a follow-up. So I put all 4 kids in the car and I fell asleep at a stoplight getting to the pediatrician's office. And that's when I knew, something's not right in my body, just something's going on. I didn't go to the doctor at that point, but for the next week or two at the very most, basically my symptoms just got worse and worse. So, I was so fatigued and so tired. I was so thirsty. I cannot even explain to you that insatiable thirst. And I was drinking just gallons of water a day. I was up probably 15 times in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, just so thirsty like I had never been in my life. The other thing was my vision. So I always had 20/20 vision, no issues there, and all of a sudden I had blurry vision. So that was when I went to the computer and Googled my symptoms and popped up, diabetes. And I'm like, oh no, oh no, oh no. So this was before I was a registered nurse. So I sent my husband to the store to get a glucometer. It was earlier in the morning. I remember I had some like super weedy, organic, healthy toast with some butter, and I had a little glass of like freshly squeezed orange juice, which was like one of my favorite things to eat, which I've never had since. But anyway, he came home and I tested, and it said high, and I knew. High means I think the threshold for most meters are, 550 or so. So it just basically means I had very, very, very high blood sugar. So packed a bag, went to the hospital, of course, was immediately admitted. And they felt they couldn't care for me at that hospital. It was a smaller hospital in Kentucky where we were living at the time, in a smaller town, and they didn't feel that they could handle like a new onset type 1 diabetic. So they sent me down to the main hospital in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was there for I think 3 or 4 days. We actually had Disney World tickets already booked, the flight and everything, for just a couple days later. So I remember I kept saying, okay, I need to get discharged by this time. I'm taking my kids to Disney World. But at the same time, I was doing lots of education on my own, learning all of this, because even though I had family members with it, it was no one that I really was close to. growing up, there was one friend that had a brother who was diabetic, and we're talking the 1990s. So I remember just seeing what he had to do, but it was very different in that day and age. A lot, they've made just improvements, leaps and bounds in the last 20, 30 years, 40 years even, just outstanding, incredible advances. So anyway, so I think I ended up getting out of the hospital in just maybe 2 days, and then we had to get on the flight the next day. So I remember in the hospital, as far as education, there wasn't a lot. I'm a registered nurse now. I've worked in many, many hospitals. So I now know, what the standard of care is with like a new onset type 1 diabetic. That's definitely not what I got at that time. I had left the hospital not even ever giving myself an injection or checking my blood sugar. So we picked up all my prescriptions when I left, and I had to give myself an insulin shot on the way home. And I remember counting to 10 probably 4 times and just not, chickening out. Oh my gosh, I can't do it. Now it just makes me laugh even thinking of this, but I finally did it. It was fine. It didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. And then that just put me on the road to, learning all of this, all the ins and outs. I bought every book you could think of out there. I was determined to get on an insulin pump immediately. CGMSs were just brand new out. It was the first year that Dexcom had been out. So I really had to fight my insurance to get those things approved. I had to write letters. My endocrinologist had to write letters. It was very difficult, but within, I think, about 6 months, I had an insulin pump. I had a continuous glucose monitor, which helped more than I can ever explain. It's a very, very difficult disease to live with without, especially a continuous glucose monitoring system. And for me, a pump. Some people do shots, they love it, and that's great. You need to do whatever works best for you. For me, I'm very, very brittle type 1. I eat extremely, extremely low carb, just so I don't have, you're still going to have crazy fluctuations. But for me, even if I had carbs and even if I was taking the correct amount of insulin, I had fluctuations that just weren't quite normal. And that's just called being a very brittle type 1 diabetic. So I just kind of figured out what would work best for me. But, it was very difficult at first, especially with 4 kids at home. And I was still breastfeeding Grace. And, even breastfeeding, taking the calories out would sometimes cause blood sugar fluctuations, more than just the normal stuff. And it was a very trying year. I remember taking my pump off once and being so mad, I threw it across the room on my bed. Thank God I didn't throw it and break it, but just, frustration. I cried many times just out of frustrations. I was actually riding my horse once. This is kind of funny. And I had my insulin pump on. I think I only had the pump for a month or 2. I had a Deltec Cosmo, which was a great pump. They don't even make it anymore. And I was cantering on my horse, and apparently it fell off somewhere. I got back to my gate at my house, and I had no insulin pump. And I went a few miles on my horse back and forth. So interestingly enough, the warranty, as long as you have the pieces of the pump, even if it's in pieces, they will they will give you a new one, but you have to have the pieces. You can't have lost the pump or had it stolen or anything like that. So my husband was determined to find those pieces to that pump in a few mile area that I was cantering on a horse. So the craziest thing, he took his horse out and just, started walking slowly. There was a field that had just been mowed, and it was mowed after I came through it on my horse. He happened to see just a little piece of that pump glittering, and he found 4 or 5 chunks of insulin pump, enough to put in a bag and ship to Cosmo, and they sent me a brand new pump. So kind of a funny story, but just one of those funny things that happen over the years. I've had an endocrinologist fire me once because he said I was too involved in my own care. Um, I've had some other endocrinologists that were outstanding. You really have to be proactive in your own care with type 1. It's not one of those things that you can go, oh my gosh, my blood sugar is 250. What do I do? Call the doctor. You have to learn it and you have to learn your body. Um, so, yeah, I think that's it. So, anyway, hope someone enjoyed this. And thanks for listening, and just have a great week, everyone.